Everyone to the International Mentoring Community, all things mentoring lounge, where we have conversations about mentorship, mentoring, mentor, mentee, anything that is connected to the world of the service of mentor. And I'm Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I am a co-founder of the International Mentoring Community, and joining us is Doug Lawrence, who's another co-founder. We'll introduce ourselves just a little bit more, but as our tradition, and to share a little bit about what we're going to cover today. So what we're doing is we're looking at this sense of track the physical indicators of your mentoring approach. So what we're going after is track. It's an acronym that we're going to share some ideas with you, but it's looking at the physicality, the physical elements, physical indicators of your mentoring approach. So as you serve as a mentor, you're going to pick up on things that are unfolding in front of you, or you want to possibly shift the physicalness of what you're chatting about, so that you can actually bring something out that's a little bit new. And that's why we're using the word track, and we're going to link that back to the notion of tracking through the outer doors using that metaphor. So we're going to take a look at what this physical mean, and then we're going to go into the actual acronym of track, make some connections for you so that you can see what's possible here. And then we're going to look at 5 considerations, as we always do, as we want to give you some things to consider as you're moving forward. That's why we are involved in all things mentoring lounge. So Doug, you want to just share a little bit about who you are?
I sure can. So I'm Doug Lawrence, and I am, as Dr. Stephen had mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders of the International Mentoring Community. I have my own business, my own practice, Talent C, and with the International Mentoring Community, I am the Director of Practice and Outreach.
Wonderful. And Dr. Stephen Hobbs, again, I am the Director of Education and Certification. I have my own company as well, dealing with nature-informed edupreneurs, right? Looking at education and how that supports those who are entrepreneurs with nature-informed world. Doug has that very deep practice in the mental health area, and usually between the two of us, we have some different views about how mentoring actually unfolds in our communities as we celebrate and weave and navigate what's unfolding in front of us on any given day. So what we're going to do is take a look at definition of mentoring. Doug, you want to share?
So mentoring is a two-way trusted relationship where both the mentor and mentee learn and develop on a personal and professional basis.
So we always use that definition in our presentations here, our broadcasts, and you certainly can take a look at meaning given to each of the words. But I wanted to pick up on something, is that it's a mentoring approach. Sometimes people will look at education or getting involved with learning, and they'll end up in more of an avoidance, which is sort of the flip side of approach. So what we often talk about mentoring is that the obstacle is the way, obstacle is the approach. Mentoring is the approach to deal with the obstacles that are in front of you. And we then use that as a way to talk about the mentoring approach, personal and professional. So just bring that out. I just wanted to go over something around the definitions, ideas, insights about the physical indicators. And I'm doing this is because we're looking at this topic of the mentoring approach and asking the mentor to look at the physical aspects of what's unfolding for you in the mentoring arrangement and connection. So physical, I'm going to bring out 3 ideas here. Physical is about relating to the things that are perceived through the senses, okay, as opposed to in your mind. In other words, they're tangible, concrete, they're there in front of you. sometimes we can look at mentoring and go into our mind and image things. But what we're looking at here is the physical aspects, what's perceived through the senses that are in front of you, what you see, what you hear, what you touch, and smell and taste. All right. There's times when I've said, this doesn't taste too good, our conversation. I might use that language to get that across, to be able to give a sense to the mentee I'm interacting with, is that something's off here. Can we take a look at this? Maybe we need to add a little bit more seasoning, or maybe we need to throw the pot of food out. I've done that. I don't do it very often because I enjoy cooking, but sometimes I have been known to, whoop, that dinner just went out the door, so to speak, and bring something in the door. And so I just bring that out as a working example here. Another way to look at physical is sort of the involvement through activity, about the quality of interaction. So you are actually in the activity, physically in the activity, and what's the quality of that interaction? And there's something to be said to doing it using something like a broadcast system like Zoom, doing it together, walking along a path. Again, there's a physicality that goes with that. And there's also the physical aspect of the expression, the fluidity, and you can think of body language. What are you picking up from the mentee as you're interacting with them? You can get into the spontaneity and the playfulness. Doug and I have had lots of conversations about different kind of mentoring activities we've been involved with, and living examples. And I know that one of the things that I always attempt to do is get that spontaneity, playfulness into my conversations if I can. And you notice I get my hands involved when I'm here, and I do the same thing when I'm actually sitting with someone or walking with someone. I get a little bit more animated, and I want to have a little bit more playfulness that goes with that. So those are some ways of looking at the physicality of this, the use of your senses, the actual involvement, and what are you picking up, the expressiveness, the playfulness that goes with that. So is there anything, or do you have an example or anything that sort of plays out the physical aspects of things, Doug, or where would you like to go here?
Just one really quick example is working with I was working with, or was going to be working with, an individual, and I was had set up a meeting with them in a coffee shop. I've never met the person before. I had an idea of what they may have looked like and all that sort of stuff. But when they walked into the coffee shop, shoulders were kind of rolled forward. They were bent over. They wouldn't do eye contact. They wouldn't do a lot of those things. So the whole body language piece was sending me messages to be able to say that there's something maybe not quite right here, and you need to explore this a little bit deeper. So the physical aspect of the relationship was what started the journey that we ended up going on, which I can honestly share that ended up with a very positive outcome, with the individual eventually getting employment and moving to actually back to Ontario and working in a head office, and since then has had the opportunity for a couple of positions of more responsibility. So it's really important for us to be watching and paying attention to that whole physicality piece, of which body language is part of that, because it does tell a story.
Oh, for sure, for sure. So if we think of the use of the word tracking, we think about in the outdoors. Maybe I might be tracking some animals and looking at the animal pathways, and I'm looking at it from that perspective and having some fun doing that. But there's also the tracking, which is a great example of what Doug is sharing, is tracking what's actually unfolding in front of you, because sometimes you might miss something if you're not tracking. And that's why we wanted to speak about this one today. So if you think of it this way, and this is the nuances of some persons that I have met in the nature-informed world, and they talk about, and I'm adding a word here too, they usually talk it in 4, I'm going to make it 5. And what I look at it is this notion of the fibers that become the threads, that become the strings, that become the cords, that become the rope, and how each of those braids together, weaves together to get to something that's really strong, right? If you were just to offer a fiber to someone and say, maybe I need to pull you up out of that hole that you're in, and all that you've got is a fiber, you don't have enough information, well, that fiber is probably not going to hold that person. But if you give them a rope and you help them because you've woven things together, took the time to help out, then out she comes, right? But there are times when you might find him in that hole and you need a rope right away, and you may have to declare, this is the rope I'm going to use to pull you out of that hole. Okay, so the notion of tracking, all right, and using this this metaphor to be able to take a look at the physicality that's in front of you. And so what Doug and I thought we would do is just break it down and use track as an acronym, and let's just take a look and see what we've got here. So the first T, well, there's only one T in track. What am I saying? The T in track, all right, we liken it to the notion of tolerance. And if you're going to track your unfolding service, your arrangement connection as a mentor, you have to bring tolerance, because you don't always know what's happening, because there is some things about transition. In other words, there's some movement that's going to probably take place, but you're also balancing it off against some tradition, right? You don't want to throw some new kind of activity at someone without maybe establishing, okay, this tradition aspect of how things go. So not everyone is willing to go for a walk with you, to travel outside with you. They may want to start in a coffee shop because that's what traditionally they have done. At the same time, you might go, well, let's not meet in the coffee shop this time. Let's do a little bit of transition. Let's go somewhere else, and explore, the shift and understanding what you're going to becoming versus looking at the sense of what you want to think of as stable and belonging. So it's a bit of a challenge. There's tolerance that you need to be able to do that as a mentor. So you're also asking that of the mentee as well, and that's a conversation. So that's looking at the T. I'd like to look at R as well here, and that's about your readiness. Are you ready, able, and willing to move into mentoring? Are you ready to move into answering the questions of the mentee? Are you truly ready to do that? And if you have hesitation or a half-assed way of saying, maybe I am, maybe I'm not, well, then that's a no, you're not ready. And that's something that Doug and I really, really emphasize, is that if it's a wavy, ready, able, and willing at any point, then it's a no, it's not a yes. And so the notion is, do you have the readiness? Because that's going to bring out the notion of your own resilience. It's going to bring out your own resourcefulness, or what I call resourence, right? Because you're going to have to deal with the routine and rituals, all right? Routines are things that you're constantly doing. Rituals might be ways of celebrate, because you're going to encounter resistance, right? At some point, you will encounter resistance. And it may be right at the very beginning, because maybe you're doing a mentoring for the workplace program and the mentee's coming to you, and you're picking up folded arms, walking in, and maybe it's opposite to that other story, shoulders back, puffed up, what are you going to be able to do for me kind of idea. Or you may get the opposite of the example that Doug is talking about. There may be resistance because of closing down. And how are you going to then bring that to life? And that's where your own resilience and resourcence, meets this notion of routine and ritual. So that's covering the T of tolerance, the R of readiness. thoughts about even connecting those, Doug?
Yeah, certainly. For me, with tolerance and readiness, there is a component of that that needs to be heightened, especially when you're dealing with somebody with mental health challenges and that. So you have to be, from a physicality perspective, you have to be more tolerant, because when you're dealing with people with mental health challenges, you do not know what's going to come out of your session that you're going to have with them. You do not know whether you're going to encounter a venting session where you're basically just there to listen and hear and not to engage any more than you possibly can. And then the other part of that is, from a readiness perspective, is knowing that there is no roadmap, and knowing that you're going into it without a roadmap. You need to be ready for whatever may come your way, and have some coping strategies, coping mechanisms in place that you can use for yourself as the mentor, but also for the benefit of the mentee. And so it's really, your tolerance needs to be in a state of readiness at all times.
Yeah, for sure. And Doug and I have had lots of conversations. We've actually worked up a few of them into what are called case examples for our certification program. So when you do the written audit of achievement certification, or the verification of the competence certification, we're using actual working cases that we have come across. And we bring them to life for you in the certification process, which is one of the great ways to learn, right? Because one of the things, as you become a mentor and you're building up your evidence portfolio and you have your logbook's full of case examples, right? And in there you can look at the tolerance and readiness aspect and what have you picked up, because it fits into the A and the C aspect of this, which is to remind you that the A is the activity, all right, the actual practice of what it is that you're doing. And as I mentioned, if you have a wavy yes to, do I have the tolerance and am I ready, then don't go into the activity until you've got a yes. No wavy yeses. That's not going to help anyone, okay? Now, I appreciate someone might say, well, how do I get past a wavy yes unless I can do it? Again, then use the sense of what is available to you, so you do no harm to yourself, no harm to the person. And if you have to, you may have to explain to the person, I may not have it all figured out here in terms of how I can help you with the mentoring. Let's work together on it. Great. All right. That's an activity. That's deepening your practice and interacting with the mentee to have that happen. Because what you're attempting to do is, there's authority that you bring. You're the authorship of your mentoring approach. But at the same time, the mentee can share some of their authority of what it means to be a mentee, and to be able to, in a sense, as a mentor, help them to help you, right? And that's really important, because then you can acknowledge what's unfolding in front of you, and being able to come from a place of, let's call it natural, being natural, right? Mm-hmm. Being who you are, and being willing to jump into the awareness factors, the attention that's happening here. And that's from an activity point of view that you want to pick up and deepen this practice. And sometimes you just got to be natural and say, I've got a bit of a wavy yes here, let's work together. So that's an aspect of that. Then the C of commitment. The notion is that if you're going to make promises in your mentoring approach, then that's a commitment to yourself. Make sure it happens. And that commitment sort of, and the word that I use, unfolds from this notion of your capabilities that you bring, the competence that you have, the capacity that you're growing to be able to meet the challenges that are there, but also the creation of what's needed. Sometimes you have to create some new tools, some new techniques. Sometimes you have to get into creation with the mentee, because neither of you know where it is that you're going, and you've got to work on something together. So that means you're capabilities, competence, and capacity is going to grow because of the continuance of your practice, of your activities. And that's where that A and C comes into the activity and the commitment. Any thoughts you want to add to the combination of those two?
Well, definitely the aspect of the activity and it being associated with the practice. So when you look at the journey that you're going on from a practice perspective, you have to be able to demonstrate tolerance. We've talked about that and how important that actually is. And your ability to, and the example that you used about, having meeting in a coffee shop and then deciding to go outside. I actually experienced that yesterday. And I had where we typically have been meeting virtually, and now we made a decision that we were going to go and be one with nature. And that changed sort of the approach, but it also changed the outcomes of our mentoring, our time together in a mentoring relationship. So it created that, it validated or refortified our commitment to the mentoring process and sort of the action outcomes that we were hoping to achieve as a result of the time we spent together.
Yeah, so this notion of TRAC, track in a sense, okay, in its own, is that it's a movement along a pathway. That's why we call it the journey mentor when you get into it a little bit deeper. We purposely use journey mentor, the suggestion of movement, pathway, so that we didn't use a term like master mentor, right? Your mentor, but how you then really deepen your practice is to be able to bring the journey out, okay? And that's why we were very, we reasoned it out. We were very purposing to the use of the word journey mentor. And therefore the journey mentor, all right, that next level of certification helps those who are in the mentoring process to learn, but also, as Doug says, to be able to assist those who are in mental health situations and how you might be able to mentor the collaborative conversation. It's the same thing as that there's a world nature-informed adventure therapy. There's forest bathing. There are other ways in which you can use nature and mentoring together. So we bring that out. Well, that leads us into the world of the K. You want to share anything about the word aligned with the letter K, Doug?
Well, it comes back. You almost have to, in fact, you have to go back to the whole acronym track, and you have to look at, the tolerance, the readiness, the activity, the commitment. All of those things need to be sort of bubble wrapped or surrounded in saran wrap or whatever term you want to use, based on the philosophy or the feeling of, I'm doing this out of kindness. And kindness needs to be part of the whole mentoring journey, the whole mentoring relationship, the whole mentoring arrangement. Kindness needs to be right at the forefront, and it's part of the coping mechanisms that you're going to be able to give to the mentee.
Yeah, so it's actually sort of, in a sense, forming a kinship, right? Is that you're leaning in. I've heard mentors talk about, I didn't know what was going on, so I leaned back out and I went, then lean in and say, I'm not sure what's going on. Let's have a conversation about this. That's the collaboration. You're leaning away. The physicality of leaning away is you're not in kinship. You're not in the sense of kindness. Yeah, you're taking care of yourself, but you're not necessarily taking care of the mentee. Would that be fair in terms of a visual to? So tracking that and where you are and how you're sitting there with someone. Sometimes I sit in chairs. I don't think you can quite tell, but I have a bit of an angle, all right, because being a little taller, my arm rests are not up there, so I have to sort of lean into my arm rest a little bit, and then I have to find a way to position myself so you don't really see it, right? But it's a little different, because if I actually sat in my chair straight on, I got nothing to lean to lean on, and I can't raise this because guess what? It's broken. So these are things that I'm always tracking around me as I'm looking at what's unfolding. So I have to find ways in which to, bring out the activity, being committed to it, finding the resilience aspect of it to be able to, show the tolerance and the kindness that goes with it. I know I'm using a really strange maybe example, but I think sometimes examples like that are really, really important to be able to bring it out. So that's the notion of track, this idea of the fibers that takes you to the threads, to the strings, to the cord, to rope, right? You are weaving, braiding that together and strengthening it, strengthening it, strengthening it. So before we close up, I just wanted to give 5 considerations, either 5 reminders, ideas for you. All right. And Doug, if you want to add anything, I'll just do a slight pause. And if you don't pick up on something, I'll just go to the next one. Okay. So the 5 considerations is you need to track your practice. In other words, discover and shape the fitness of your mentoring. Fitness here is, what does it lead to? What does your mentoring approach lead to? Discover and shape that. In other words, track your practice. The next one is from track, just as an acronym. It's the art of evolving through the practice of involving. All right. You might, hang on a minute, that's a lot of evolving there. Okay. But to track, there's an art of evolving and being present because of the practice of encouraging the involving. And that's one of the distinctions we make between mentoring and coaching. Mentoring, it has a very much an evolving. Coaching has an involving. We have a video on that in our mentoring lounge if you wanted to look up a little bit more. The third one I wanted to bring out is track the origin of your mentoring practice. Sometimes it's helpful to reflect on from whence I came. All right. I actually wrote a short, I'll call it an ebook, paper, and I tracked over the last 4 decades who was the main mentor in that decade. And what was it that was helped me to learn and deepen my practice of mentoring. And so I call it the 4 mentors at this point in time. I'm now into my 5th, so I will be writing about my 5th mentor soon and adding that to the story. So that'll be fun to see how that unfolds as well. The next one is track the possibility of your mentoring practice. Think about it from the future. What's the possibility of my mentoring practice? And bring those imagined elements back to you. So in other words, you will use your mind to go into what's the possible physicality of where I might be doing my mentoring. For me, I know I'm going to connect it to the outer doors, but I'm also looking for a place that is out there that has a physicalness so that I can actually inform myself looking at that mentoring practice from that future perspective. So track that as well. It's helpful. Okay. And the last one is track your traveling companions. Who's coming with you? All right. Doug and I started out in the international mentoring community a few years back. Doug's a traveling companion around mentoring. All right. There's a few others that you meet along the way because sometimes we bring them in and interview them. We have an interview coming up around the story of presence that will be taking place in a couple of weeks from now. One of the chaps that we've met along the way, he's a traveling companion. You'll get to meet him as well. We'll make more notice about that as it comes up. So really asking yourself, who's coming with you? All right. Because if you remember the notion of the fitness of your mentoring, what does it lead to? So who's coming with you? Who's helping you lead? You are leading who to come with you? So those are 5 considerations. If you use the acronym of TRACK, link to those ideas. Any thoughts you want to add to those considerations?
No, those were them.
Okay. So just as a reminder, we're going to use T as tolerance, R as readiness, A as activity, practice, C as commitment, and K as kindness, just to remind you of that acronym. All right. So what we're doing is we're suggesting track the physical indicators of your mentoring approach. We shot lots of other videos that bring out the mindfulness, the emotional aspects, the soul, spirit aspects. We thought we would do something that leans a little bit more into the physical indicators so that we're balancing up our sharing here. So Doug, I think we're getting close to closing down, and I know you're going to be going off to a deep practice session. In other words, you're going to go mentoring. And what I wanted to do then is, as we always do, seeing as though I do the introduction, Doug gets to do the out for us. And when I know that he's done, I'll just say take care and we'll close down this stream. Doug.
So one of the things that I want our listeners to take away from our conversation today was of the 5 letters of the acronym, the T, the R, the A, the C, the K, is I want you to always have in the back of your mind, kindness is one of the most important things that you can bring to a mentoring relationship. It is a coping mechanism, a strategy that you can use, especially if you're dealing with somebody who has got mental health challenges. And so always keep that at sort of in your mentoring toolkit, for lack of a better choice of words, that kindness is definitely something that you need to focus on.
Thank you, and